Welcome to the Non-Essential Podcast. I'm Steve Gibson.
I'm Ben Matlock.
And I'm laughing because we're like kind of on a time thing, so apparently my brain, that means do the countdown a lot quicker than normal.
Yeah, hopefully I can sync that up.
Sync it.
God damn it. Yeah, welcome to the show. We're back again for more fucking fun. And like, I always feel like there's one day of the week where I go like, man, this would be the day to do the show. Like
it's never the day that we do the show.
Right. But fuck it, we're gonna tough it out. We're gonna get through this together. So today it was my turn to bring something to the table, and I'm responsible, so I totally didn't half-ass this at the last minute. But one of the things I've done is mythology, a lot of Japan mythology. But I do try to travel, not physically, because that takes energy and money. But I do try to spread it around and see what other cultures came up with. And today I thought we would go down under with a...
shit, half the real things down there are nightmares. I can't imagine.
Exactly. So, like, the fascinating thing about Australia is, like, no matter what dangerous, like, fantasy animals you come up with, like, none of them are as terrifying as, like, the box jellyfish or, like, the giant spiders who will just randomly claim a roll of your toilet paper and fight you to the death to keep it. Like, all these other things is, like, these aren't fucking scary at all compared to, like, the snake that will fucking kill you in 5 seconds.
But there's, like, two parts of the world where these, like... what do they call it? Cryptozoological whatever myths, like these animals are like actually plausible to exist, and one's like the deepest heart of Africa where like man can't hardly penetrate, and then the other's Australia. Like,
yeah,
like we've laughed before about all the different like Bigfoot myths throughout the world, but it's like, yeah, the Australian Bigfoot, we're like, yeah, probably a thing.
Yeah, it is, actually. There is an Australian Bigfoot. It's not that interesting because it's just a fucking Australian Bigfoot. But it's like every culture, like, seems to have come up with, like, what if there was just, like, a big fucking man monkey hiding in the woods? But yeah, so, I thought we'd check out what Australia's about. And a lot of, like, Australian monsters kind of, as you would suspect, kind of start with like Aboriginal origins, but like in a lot of cases, like they start there, but they get spread around, the entire continent, and like different groups of people have different ideas of what these monsters are, and even though they use the same name, it's like there are variations of what it is, and nothing kind of exemplifies that more than the bunny yip, a.k.a. the wowie wowie, the yalu, the Keon Pratty, or the dongu.
I didn't even consider that. I was thinking the like horrific animals that actually exist. I didn't think about the names. And
yeah. So the bunny yip has kind of just turned into a catch-all label for like a large variety of monsters, because they like stories either describe it as this ferocious fucking man-eater or a really calm, docile herbivore. Some stories have it as a giant starfish. Others see it as like a crocodile with a dog head. It could have feathers, or it could have fins. It could have a duck bill, a beard. It could be a cyclops. It could have a stomach mouth.
So that's less a name than more of probably the sound an Australian makes if they see just a weird creature. They're like, bunny yip.
Bunny yip. Which is the worst last word you could have. Crying bunny yip like a bitch. The only common element in bunny yip stories is that it's fucking huge. So basically anywhere where there are like swamps or lakes or any aquatic environment, even if like they're drained out in like a dry season, the bunny yip probably has some story there. and it's not even really limited to water. It can, like, there are stories of it, crawling onto land and fucking with people. As I get called from California.
It's a bunny yip. It's like, hey, I'm here to set the record straight.
We actually, that's not true. So in Aboriginal cultures, the bunyip was regarded as like a devil or an evil spirit most of the time. But even then, nobody really agreed on what it was like or how it would fuck with people. It apparently had like a booming cry that would echo across the lands. And if you got too close to its territory, it would kill you by hugging you, which is like a ferocious carnivore. But other tribes kind of saw it not as like a monster, but as like this benevolent protector of wildlife, and probably just a big cuddly lug who didn't know his own strength. However, if you saw the beast, native Australians who believed it was supernatural, they believed it would alter the water level in his environment, so it could cause like floods or whatever, or dry it out if it wanted to ruin a fucking tribe's day, I guess. There's also a story of the bunyip somehow using hypnosis to make a woman his slave for several weeks until a thunderstorm suddenly broke the spell.
See, I was a fan, but of course he's got to be some kind of a perv creep too.
Right.
Don't meet your heroes, kids.
Right. Nowadays, the bunyip usually appears in like children's books and shit. For any cryptozoologists who are convinced that the creature is out there, most experts believe that the explanation of any like eyewitness accounts was just people getting freaked out by elephant seals or something rushing at them from the water. Which, if you ever look
terrifying.
If you've ever looked up a picture of an elephant seal, you might think it's some ungodly creature too. But yeah, there's like the origins of this, like it kind of leads to like just people probably just trying to explain nature, like different sort of like, the ups and downs of like a place draining out in dry weather or something. Like, okay, monster.
Like most cultures have some kind of, there's a reason that we're going through this drought. It's either like the gods need human sacrifices or, witchcraft, that kind of stupid stuff. But,
so I tried to stay away a little bit from like those, like, a lot of these tie into like Aboriginal Dreamtime mythology, which is really kind of, how did the world come to be? But there was one other one I wanted to bring up, and it's the Tiddalik, which is less of a monster story and having to do with kind of the creation of the world as we know it, rather than like tourists getting attacked by monsters or some shit in the modern day.
How dare you? I'm way too immature to let a name like the Tiddalik go by with...
Yeah. So the Tiddalik is... it's a gargantuan fucking frog. So, naturally that's not just hanging out in Australia in 2019, fucking people up, unless that's pretty believable now that I think about it, because Australia has everything and it's always huge.
Yeah, I mean, people go missing in the interior of Australia all the time. It could be a frog that's eating them.
I love like a helicopter just flying over and just in the middle of the woods there's just a giant fat frog. But anyway, the Tiddalik was a frog that one day drank up all the world's fresh water, making it grow in incredible size, and basically he just decided to keep it all in his bloated mouth, refusing to spit it back out. Everything around him began to dry out and die, so the other animals devised a plan to make the Tiddalik laugh. The Tiddalik was clearly going like through a bad breakup or something, because like it just like, why else would you engage in such a dangerous level of consumption and then refuse to laugh? Like if you're gonna drink that much, something went wrong. So naturally the frog wasn't an easy crowd, but somehow the eel named Nabunum began to dance and twist himself into knots, which I guess was the funniest fucking shit ever, because Tiddalik began to howl with laughter. Meanwhile, the beaver who was going to follow the eel, who would have to wait until like Twitter was invented to try out his great Ribwitch's self-care bit. Unfortunately, making the frog laugh released all the water onto the fucking environment, causing a natural disaster of epic proportions, causing massive floods. What did they think was
going to happen? I thought that was the entire point of the...
Well, they wanted the water back out. They weren't expecting a massive flood that would kill off most wildlife and spread out any other living creatures to different islands and drowning many more. Nowadays, you have to imagine they tell that story to children with a happier ending, that nothing died, but we know what happened.
Yeah.
So that's the Tiddalik, but here's the couple of monsters that I was able to find. Like, oddly enough, a lot of like Aboriginal monsters in Australia, it's just like it's the rainbow
the
snake.
British.
Yeah, the British. But it's a lot of that origin of life stuff where it's just like, we have to please the big snake, and then there's another big snake, and they dwell on snakes a lot, but there are some just classic monsters that, and one of them is called the drop bear. So
I've heard of this. I don't remember anything about it, but it's like the drop bear would be my kung fu name if I ever...
It would be a great kung fu stance.
Yeah.
So koalas are already like just fucking assholes from everything I've gathered about Australia. So imagine if they were a bit bigger and hunted people, including like, and not just people, like anything they could, by dropping from the top of trees onto their victim's head. After knocking them out, they would then proceed to feed on them. That's basically the drop bear. They would Mario you to death.
Frankly, you wouldn't even have to have like a big, scary creature. I think a squirrel could drop bear me because you'd be so caught by surprise. You just, yeah.
You'd just faint in fear.
Yeah.
So they have sharp teeth, razor claws, and because of their element of surprise, they had no problem going after any prey, regardless of their size. Some of the rumored methods to avoid the drop bear was to spread toothpaste or Vegemite behind your ears and neck, but the best method was to hold a screwdriver above your head if you walked through the woods, so the thing would stab itself if it dropped on you. So interestingly enough, there actually is a creature they found the fossils of from prehistoric times that they suspect is very similar to like what they imagine a drop bear would be. But you can probably imagine that modern stories of drop bears is probably the result of Australian locals just fucking with tourists for a laugh.
I know, because look at that asshole Ben walking around with two crests behind his ears and a screwdriver over his head.
Dude's rubbing Vegemite on himself like an idiot.
Frankly, though, that seems like a way better use of Vegemite than like actually eating it. Like
that's the thing. They laugh at us. They're eating that shit down there.
Right.
But again, like, if you want tourists to stay away, you could just tell them about the billions of other things that are actually in the wild wanting to kill you. You don't have to make shit up.
Right.
So the other monster I got is the Yaramayahu. These things stand at about 4 feet. The Yaramayahu is a little red man. It has kind of a big snakish head, a big mouth without any teeth or fangs, and a large stomach. Because it has no teeth, it swallows its prey whole, but its fingertips and toes are like that of the suction cups of an octopus. They live in thick, leafy trees, and much like the drop bear, they just fucking pounce people. Once they've done that, they start draining the victim's blood through their suckers, just enough to keep them alive but incapacitated. They'll then pace around their victim and maybe even wander away for a while as they kind of work up their appetite. When the beast returns, he lies facing the victim like a lizard and crawls forward with its mouth open wide, sucking in his prey head first. He then rises and does a little dance for some reason while the victim gradually slides into his stomach. He then drinks from the river and falls asleep. So, like...
that's what I would do if I was a...
That's the thing. This gets really relatable because when he wakes up, he immediately vomits what was still in his stomach. So I think we've all been there.
Yeah, I'm never going to eat like that again. Oh, another person walking by.
So once he vomits you back up, he'll check on the vomited remains. He'll start to see if, like, you're playing dead, and he'll start poking you and tickling you and shit. If he gets no response, he'll go back to sleep, which the victim can use as an opportunity to run away if they're not actually dead.
But wouldn't you do that before it wakes up the first time? Like, why would you wait?
No, it wakes up and then vomits you.
Oh, I see. Yeah,
so it, like, passes out and then it wakes up. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So if the Yaramayahu finds out you are still alive when it's sort of fucking with you, it'll eat you again and regurgitate you over and over. Every time a victim gets eaten by the creature, they come out a little bit shorter, and eventually the victim will become a Yaramayahu themselves if they can't get away.
Or they'll be dead.
Yeah, or you just die. It depends. Depends what they're doing, how much digestion they go through. But if the Yaramayahu fails to check on his victim, the spirit of the fig tree it lives in will kill the animal for just being shit at hunting, I guess, leaving the Yaramayahu as a husk of a body that will eventually become a cold fungus upon the trees. So...
I like to try to, like, imagine... We've talked about it before. A lot of lore is based on... Like the drop bear, I would say, if you say they found, like... Oh, here's fossilized remains that kind of look like what you'd expect a drop bear to look like. So my explanation from, like, a rational standpoint would be, like, sometime within the last hundreds of years while Australia was populated, they came across a fossilized thing and they made up a creature around it. That's, kind of my theory on dragons. People...
Right. And again, koalas are actually assholes. So it's like a believable story that a big one could fuck with somebody like that.
Right. But then, and like something like this, like you've got snakes, you've got leeches, you've got plenty of things that like you could say, oh, over the like thousands of years or hundreds of years, however long the lore's evolved, like you could see it evolve. But then where the fuck does this like, oh, but there's this random rule if he doesn't check on the victim.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
Well, I mean, that's the spirit of the trees dictating the laws of nature. I think
I like to trace that back to the one like smart ass kid, like the elders telling the story, and he's like, when he spits you back up, and it's like, what if he's not hungry anymore? It's like, by law, he has to be. Stop asking questions, Dwayne.
Well, this is such an elaborate, complex story for what is ultimately just an explanation for why there are mushrooms on trees.
Yeah.
Like, we made a monster story, but ultimately it had to come back to, like, why are these kind of colorful mushrooms here? Because once again, that's what these are all about. It's just trying to explain shit they already know is there. They just don't know how it came to be.
It's true. We've all been around kids that just ask why about everything. So that's maybe the origin story. It's just like some kid kept asking why, and it drove his parents insane, and they just made up this ridiculous story. But then the kid went on to become like a much beloved village elder, and like the kid actually believed the stories and passed them on.
That's how my dad tells stories, though. Like, every other Aboriginal parent back then probably would have been like, oh, it's here from the great creator or something. Just something obvious like that and straightforward. My dad's the type of person where he'll be like, well, there's a monster and he'll just build up this plot and just improv it until like, oh shit, I got to bring it back to the original point. So last thing I got here, again, it's kind of hard to find just straight up monsters because Australians already kind of live in a monster infested hell. So, just one more sort of origin story I was able to pull that I really enjoyed reading. This is about a man named Condole, who was the sole owner of fire in the beginning of man. Nobody else knew how to make it, and he wouldn't really share it with anyone. So a nearby...
Which would totally be like me if I invented something like fire.
Yeah.
So you're super important when you have it, but when everybody can have it, then it's like, oh,
right.
Nobody needs Steve anymore.
So kind of like from the get-go, you're like, oh, Condoleezza shit. But, the nearby people, tribes people, invited Condole to one of their evening rituals one time, hoping that the man would bring the fire with him to share. Condole showed up, but he didn't bring the fire, and it pissed the people off. So, the story paints Condole as being selfish, but I think he was absolutely right not to bring the fire because you were trying to manipulate him.
Right.
You didn't actually want to hang out with Condole. You just wanted his fire, so fuck you guys.
And then they get pissed off when he's smart enough to figure that out. They're like, damn it.
Maybe he was testing you to see if you wanted to actually be his friend. Angry, the people tried to force him to go back and get his fire. But Condole was bigger and stronger than most of them and was basically like, no, go fuck yourself. Finally, a sucker-punching piece of shit named Ribale speared Condole in the neck, which is just, not called for. And totally
straight up murder at that point. Yeah.
Totally puts a damper on the party. For some reason, this act turned nearly everyone around into different animals, and Condole himself ran to the water and turned into a whale with water spouting out of the spear wound that he received.
I've always wondered why they shoot water up in the air. I get it now.
Again, a really complex way to describe something you notice in nature. Ribale took Condole's fire and placed it in a tree, with the idea being that Condoleezza's fire's essence lives on in basically every flammable object.
I say that's the worst place to store fire. Kids don't.
Yeah. So that's why we have fire. That's why we have animals, and that's why nothing about the beginning of time is as scary as what happens in Australia every day. But yeah, a bit more brief of a topic this week, but I thought it was kind of interesting, just how, like I said, they just get really fucking elaborate for things you could just be like it really says something that a lot of ancient Western civilization was very much like, oh, why is there thunder? We're a thunder god. Shut up. Don't ask about it. And in Australia, it's it started with a boa constrictor, and he met a woman, and the woman tried to take his milk, and it's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Why is there thunder? Just get.
And then, of course, they're far from the only place where you get these elaborate myths for the most mundane of things, and of course, a person that studies human history and different cultures would point out this is what people did for entertainment. We didn't have YouTube, so they'd sit around and just make up these stories. But man, it's also a great example of kind of that telephone game.
Sorry, go ahead.
So it's kind of an example of that telephone game phenomenon where you just keep telling stories and adding on to them until they become these monstrosities of lore that you're like.
Well, I was going to say, to be fair, on YouTube, there is a subset of video creators on there who are doing exactly this. And there's an audience you're right, this is how lightning came to be. So we do that for entertainment now. And like you said, imagine how fucking bored they were probably then. That is a pretty good story of how did whales happen? Well, some piece of shit stabbed a dude in the neck.
And that's why they make that mournful whale sound too. It's what was the guy's name? Like Ronaldo or whatever, and like
Rabale, yeah.
Rabale.
Ronaldo.
I knew it wasn't that because that's very much not.
Yeah, that's the whale with like an Italian restaurant or something. Yeah, that's on Natural Geographic, right? Sounds of the whale. Oh.
Maybe my next like art project will be releasing a whale song album, but it's just me because I can't do whale songs. So you just have some random fat guy sitting over here going, "Whoa, whoa."
I remember like back in like the early 2000s, I found some site where it was like, I was never a big fan of like Radiohead, and I like a couple of their songs now, but back then I didn't really like them. And some site was like, I remember it was really funny. It was like, hey, I got a sample of the next new Radiohead album, and everybody clicked it, and it just went to a video of whale sounds. It was just like, it's like, wow, great album.
Getting all sorts of ideas here.
But yeah, anyway, that's it. That's all I have. So I'm done. We're done. You gotta take your kid to Santa Claus, which is way too fucking early.
Yeah. Well, it's my city has always done this thing where I don't know what they call it. I'll call it Santa Palooza, but it's like there's like all sorts of like people dressed up as various like versions of Santa, like the European, like the old school Santa is the regular modern Santa. But yeah, I guess I get doing it in November because in December people are probably they're probably busy doing actual Santa like gigs.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Man, the other day me and a friend at work were joking about like just being the worst like auditioner for like a mall Santa or something because you can't get ho 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 right.
Ho ho he.
Ho ho ho. Fuck. Damn it.
Ho five fo fun. Wait, no, the wrong guy.
Can I do that again?
Ho ho lion.
Can I try that again? It's like, well, do you think it will help? No. He ha. Fuck.
All right, Ben, can you work with children? You're like, yeah, I think so. And you can have them sit on your lap. Hell no, I'm not touching kids.
Yeah, can we separate? Can there be a barrier? Can they just tell me what they want through a phone?
It's like the prison glass. You're on the one side.
That would be great. Like if Santa has to come out in like a jumpsuit. Santa, why are you behind the glass? Oh, fucking DUI. Don't ask. What do you want?
What do you want? Yeah. Well, I want out of here.
To be fair, I thought Rudolph he could kind of handle autopilot a little bit, but I guess not.
Well, I mean, how many millions of breaking and entry charges could you like levy against Santa?
That's true. Santa I was going to say, like, you're going to take your kid to meet Santa and that'll be adorable and stuff. But, like, I remember being little and terrified of the idea of Santa.
Yeah.
Because not only is he breaking in and shit, he is judging you all year. And
that's the thing. It's like that song. He's either a judgmental, like, kind of vengeful demigod, or he's like a child perv because it's like he knows when you're sleeping and he knows if you've been bad or good. That's like, what?
Yeah.
Why is he spying on you?
Yeah. When do I get to judge him? You know, because because guess what, fucker? I work all day every year. You have slave labor up there. And, you know, the moment you bring that into like an actual country, you make us all accessories to your fucking human crime. So,
So Santa might be the most terrifying of these legends that we're talking about this week.
Yeah, that's true. Like nothing.
And then he
really
eats your fucking
it.
cookies. Like that's the most insulting part.
Yeah. Listen, Mr. Magic, I'm pretty sure you can handle like set it preheating an oven, fucker. Leave my shit alone. And once again, you know, he's the fucking delivery guy. Like, if we're gonna put him on a pedestal, kids should just be meeting UPS drivers at the mall every year.
Yeah. Well, technically,
they do the same shit.
That's who But
so yeah, let's go into the holiday season. Just fucking bitter already. That's the emotional theme of this show every year.
Well, I know you had it way before us, but I mean, it's I guess technically like mid-November now, but we've had snow on the ground for 3 days, and screw that.
Yeah, that's terrible. Like up here, it's snowed a couple times, but nothing to like stick to the ground or anything. Right now, it's just fucking annoyingly cold. But
yeah, it's stupid. I hate winter.
Yeah, and there's nothing we can do about it. The winters are gonna just keep getting worse, and then we'll be like, "Oh, thank God it's not winter anymore." Why is California on fire?
Well, in fairness, it's winter and California's on fire, so
that's true. Like, you know, climate change is terrible, and we need to do things to address it. But part of me, like, is like, if you can distance yourself from the natural disaster and the tragedy of it, what is happening on this planet is fascinating. Because it is just doing like, it is a planet like torn in two. Like places are trying to like burn to death and freeze to death at the same time.
Right. I was reading today that Venice is flooding. It's like, you mean the city like of water is flooding? Like,
yeah, like there's parts of fucking Venice that people are just naturally doing their shopping like hip deep in water. And it's like, that's like just how you live. The city that for hundreds of years people have famously lived alongside the ocean are suddenly unable to cope. Well, it's funny. I was like, I remember watching like that Bill Nye show that he put on Netflix, which didn't help anything or really be all that entertaining, honestly. It was kind of a disappointment. But there's one episode where I think they were talking about Venice or whatever, and they're like, so what are we going to do about this water level problem? I was like, well, we put up a wall, but the water's going over the wall a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Whoops.
It's funny because it's terrifying.
Yeah, a little bit. And I can only like kind of make humor about it because I don't live with it all the time. Like if I was down there, I'd be like, this fucking sucks. Like I have to fucking I had to put like 15 phone books under my shoes to be able to walk around.
Yeah, but imagine how much money those gondola drivers are making right now.
Yeah.
Like, they're no longer tethered to the canals. They can just go wherever the hell they want.
It's an entire society that's just like walking on stilts like fucking clowns. Anyway, see what we did there is called padding, dear listener, because we had to hit the half an hour mark.
The joke's on us. The listener's thinking what I did there is quit listening 20 minutes ago. Dear podcaster.
It's called padding, and it's illegal to do on your podcast, technically. It's podcast fraud. So we'll have a report to the FBI link by the episode. But yeah, as long as we're not in a federal holding cell, we'll see you next week with more shit.
Toodaloo.